Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. On today's show, we break down the rainy week that was and also review our first round of predictions. Brett, Baty, and Francisco Alvarez are heating up, and our rotation review makes its return. We take a look down on the farm at Alex Ramirez in Brooklyn, and as always, we close out the show answering your mailbag questions. So subscribe to the Mets Pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube or wherever you get your shows. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. This spring, be transformed during the Cadillac Move Up sales event. This is your moment to step out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. And here's your reminder to subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You could always watch on SNY's YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMayo. And Joe, what a rainy week it was. It felt like we were waiting forever for baseball to actually be played against the Mets division rival in the Atlanta Braves. Of course, we'll jump all the way back to the series against the Nationals, which was undoubtedly a bit of a disappointment, a bit of a stunner in those first two games, and then the Mets collected themselves. So first off, Joe, how are you doing? And just initial thoughts on the last couple games here for the Mets.
Well, if Steve Cohen has $1 billion laying around, I think there could be a retractable roof put on top of Citi
$800 million
or 800
projection.
Yeah.
And it was like
crazy.
Still a conversation. That part made me laugh. It was like it's a thought, not definite, but a thought.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't need a retractable roof just because a couple April games got rained out, but just an overall weird week for the Mets. Obviously, against the Nationals, that was a bit of a letdown. And last week after we finished recording, Connor, when we were talking to our producer Jeff, and he liked your minnows quote that you have to take out the minnows. The minnows came and nipped at the Mets' heels, and obviously taking 2 out of 3. So that was disappointing. And then the Atlanta series, losing 2 out of 3. I don't even know how to take that series, right? Like they lost game 1, couple rainouts, have the doubleheader on Monday. The pitching let them down in the first game, which, no offense to Denny Reyes, probably was to be expected. A bullpen game didn't pan out, but the offense showed up. And then in game 2, they had the lead. Tyler McGill was rolling. And then the 6th inning happened. All of a sudden, the Mets are down again. It's like, oh, are they about to get swept here today? And then our guy, Francisco Alvarez, coming up with a big hit. McNeil homering. So I don't know how to take the Braves series, but I mean, they lost 2 out of 3, but it doesn't feel like a normal loss 2 out of 3. Like, I don't think there's all rage online right now. And I'm certainly not panicking as they head into Detroit now this week for a 3-game set.
I'm with you all the way. For all my disappointment, how they came out of the gate against the Nationals. And at some point, you do need to tip your cap a little bit. Like, Josiah Gray looks really, really good this year, and he's been a big-time name for a while that there's been hope built around. He's putting it together. Like, that's going to happen against these teams that are stockpiling talent. I still expected the Mets to win at minimum 2 of 3 and hopefully a sweep there. So for all the disappointment I had in the National series, I felt the opposite against the Braves. And I don't mean to have that loser mentality, but Friday, I mean, they played 5 innings, right? And we are starting to, unfortunately, accept reality of what David Peterson is and that he might not get a lot of opportunities in this rotation anymore for this season. So that game, to me, was, no pun intended, a wash. And then you look at the fight they showed in a bullpen game, that they were up against somebody that is projected to be the NL Cy Young winner. And this is why I'm a little optimistic, Joe. The Mets have Spencer Strider's number right now. I don't know why. I have no idea why. But the Mets have been able to perform against Strider. And they lost 9-8 in a game where they started not just a bullpen game, but guys that I don't even know if some of them are going to be in the bullpen the entire year. So I liked the fight they showed in that game. And then they took care of business in game 2. And I think, Joe, the optimism stems from not just fighting because you got to win. Like you highlighted, it's a little bit on the backs of the young guys at times. Brett Baty has been phenomenal. It turns out if you play Francisco Alvarez and let him, a young 21-year-old player, work through things, that good things can happen. So That was about as optimistic as I can come out of a 2-4 stretch, I think, as possible, especially when you go, and I'm not going to do last week again where it's like, oh, things are going to be great. You're playing the Nationals, but you got the Tigers, Rockies, Reds, and Nationals again on deck. Big opportunity for the Mets to start to stack together 3 out of 4 wins here, 3 out of 4 wins there.
And also, I mean, I'm sure we're going to get to this shortly, but the rotation's coming back finally.
The real rotation.
The
Yes.
rotation that we had thought at the beginning of March was going to be the rotation for this team. It's largely here, other than Jose Quintana, who obviously still has months to go until he's back. We have Max Scherzer coming off the suspension. Justin Verlander finally ready to make his Mets debut. So things are starting to come into shape health-wise in the rotation. And the big thing, the young kids in the lineup. Because what is the thing that we have talked about for the last month since opening day is guys like Vogelback, like they get on base, great, but they're getting on base for Marcana and Luis Guillorme and Tomas Nido, and those guys just aren't performing offensively. How much does the turntables? I was going to do an Office reference, but how the tables turn a little bit with now Brett Baty's here, and boy, does he look big league ready. And like he should have been the opening day third baseman, but it is what it is. There's no use crying over spilled milk. He's here. He's playing every day. He's hitting righties. He's hitting lefties. In the doubleheader on Monday, every batted ball he had, except for one, was north of 100 miles an hour exit velocity. So that is something that I have talked about on the show dating back a year. One skill that translates from AAA to the major leagues: hard hit balls, barrel control, exit velocity. Those are things that if you have that skill set, that's going to translate whether you're facing a AAA pitcher or a major league pitcher. And then the game changer, of course, is Francisco Alvarez.
And,
Yeah.
We'll get really deep into the kids later too. Not to cut you off, Joe, but
that's okay. I could go all day on the prospects. So
they've been, and it's great to see that they might not be that longer. They've been so good that we have carved out part of this show just for them. So I don't want to jump all over you there, but there is a full section for them. But you're right. There's no way to talk about the last couple of games without them. I mean, that's what stands out and that's what matters. And what else matters is our friendly competition that we are going to keep running. Friendly, not so friendly, I don't know. Throughout the season, it was our first round of it. I think we learned the hard way, Joe, that sometimes we're going to have to agree with each other because there is one in here that we're kind of laughing at. And we're like, yeah, we knew it would go that way. So the placeholder name right now is the scoreboard. We do have a front runner from a listener. I'm not going to give it away yet, but we are going to give the listeners one more week to name our segment where we make our picks for the week ahead. The placeholder is the scoreboard, but a listener has a really good idea. Let's see if people can top that. So the first one was, how many home runs will Pete Alonso hit in the next 7 games? 3 against the Nationals, 4 against the Braves. Obviously, a lot of turmoil over this last week with weather. Joe, you said 2. I said 3. The result was 1. Nobody gets a point. Over, under, push. How many innings for Joey Lucchesi in his next start? We set the number at 6. Joe, you said push. I said under. I think this is the one that you said push just to be different from me. And because of that, I get the point. Lucchesi pitched 5.1 innings. Over under push is set at 4 for how many games will Francisco Alvarez start in the next 7 games. Joe, you said under. I said push. The question's disqualified because they only played 6 games, including a doubleheader. This one wouldn't really stack up. Yes or no, will Ronnie Mauricio play another position besides second base or shortstop before the next episode? We both said no. The result was no. We both get a point. How many wins for the Mets in these next 7 games? Joe, you said 4. I said 5. I probably should lose a point for this one, but they won 2. No points rewarded. The score right now, I am up 2-1, Joe. And that brings us to this week's contest. And a reminder, once again, we are keeping score, and there will be apparently a big prize. I noticed that in our rundown this week. I thought it was just a prize last week. Now I'm seeing big prize. I'm starting to think big, Joe. Or is one of us going to have full stake in the Cadillac Club? What is this going to be here? I'll try not to get my hopes up. Other than the right to, of course, talk smack for the next year. These are based on the next 6 games. The Mets have 3 in Detroit, followed by 3 at home against the Rockies. We will start with the first one. And Joe, since I am in the lead by 1, I will give you first answer out of the gate. Over, under, push. The number is at 2. How many home runs will Brett Baty hit in the next 6 games? Joe, I know you're just chomping at the bit to talk about Brett Baty today.
Push. I'm gonna push that one. We'll save my longer Brett Baty conversation for the next segment, but he just looks great and he's comfortable. He's hitting the ball hard to all fields, and we have Detroit on deck, and a little bit of a easier stretch on paper here. So I think he'll push for 2, which is won a series. I'll take that every day.
I'll take the under. I'm thinking 1 for Baty, but I think it could be close. And of course, it depends just on how much he plays. All right, over under push. This number is also set at 2. How many home runs for Pete Alonso in the next 6 games? Joe, I'm going to go with 3 here. It's a big number. I hate myself for it, but when he sees these opportunities sometimes against these teams, especially their bullpens, he hits them in batches. So it was either an under or a big over for me. I'll take the over. Where are you going?
I'm scared because Pete Alonso looks a little lost right now. He's been struggling, obviously, over the last couple.
He looks human.
Here. Yeah, exactly. He looks human. So I'm not going to bank on the bounce back in these next 6 games. So I'm going to say under. I'm going to say he hits 1 home run over the next 6 games, but maybe he starts to hit the ball a little better, get some doubles, get some singles, work some good at bats. But I think from a home run standpoint, I'm going to go under and say 1.
All right, this next one, over under push, the numbers at 3. How many games will Francisco Alvarez start in the next 6 games? Joe, you're up first.
So over under 3. I'm going to push that. I think they're going to be moving closer and closer to a 50-50 split. And then we're not far from Francisco Alvarez, I think, getting the majority of games, because his improvement behind the plate is something that Buck specifically said after Monday's doubleheader. And I think that was probably the main reason in premise why Tomas Nido was getting the majority of starts over Alvarez was defensively. So if Buck's starting to feel confident about Alvarez's defense, I think the playing time's going to start shifting in his direction. But for now, I'll push and say 50-50 with Nido.
I'm going with the push as well, just because of the little road trip in between. We'll see if Alvarez sees any time at DH, but I'll go with the push here and say it's 50-50. I think things are trending in the right direction for the long term, Joe. But in this unique scenario, the weird schedule they just had, this will be at 3 for me. All right. So, by the way, you'll notice a theme over these next couple. Over under push, the number is 5 for how many innings Justin Verlander pitches in his next start. Where are you at here, Joe? He has had a little bit of rehab work. It's not like he's just jumping back into the fray.
I am going to push. I think he threw 65-ish pitches in his rehab. I had it up before, but I closed the window accidentally, but it was in the 60s. So I'm thinking his cap is probably around 80. So I'm going to say he goes 5 innings and throws around 80 pitches, gives up a run, walks a couple guys, strikes out a few guys. And I think it's an overall successful and healthy debut for Verlander as a Met.
I'm going to go with the over. I actually don't think it gets the 6. I think he'll have a chance to at least get an out in the 6th.
5 1/3.
Yeah, I'm thinking the 5 1/3 route here. So I will take the over on Verlander, but you're right. That pitch count needs to be closely weighed in here. Over under push, the number of innings is the same at 5 for Max Scherzer in his next start. This one, Joe, I am going to go with the push on Scherzer. I think that we've seen him get into some trouble in the 6th inning. He is coming off a little bit of the layoff. I'm going to take a push for Scherzer in this spot.
Well, I just need him to get 1 out in the 6th inning, just like you with Verlander. So I'm hammering the over. I think Max is going to be coming back kind of pissed off from the suspension and everything. I think we're going to get a big time Max Scherzer outing on Wednesday when he pitches against his former team in Detroit. And I think he might go 6 1/3. I'll go with that even.
Okay. Over under push, the number is 5 once again for how many innings Kodai Senga goes through in his next start. Joe, where are you at on Senga?
I'm going to push this one. At this point, the way Kodai Senga is now pitching, talking a few starts in a row here, he gets himself into high pitch counts early in games. And I think that just limits how far he's going to go. And, the league is adjusting to him a little bit. And the whole game of baseball, we talk about this largely with prospects because we haven't had a Japanese player come to the Mets in quite some time, but it's the same premise of you're going to come in, you're new, they've never seen you before, and things are going to kind of go as they do. Then the league will start to adjust as they get tape on you. Now you need to adjust back to the league. So that's the next step for Kodai Senga. I'm going to go push 5 innings, and he'll give up maybe 3 runs, but hopefully he can start to get that pitch count down earlier in games, because it's clear he's capable and durable enough to go 90 plus pitches. Like, I don't think a pitch count is a concern for him. It's just a matter of not using so many of those pitches in the first 4 innings.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a tough stretch for Senga in terms of being able to pitch deep into games, which I don't think necessarily shocks us with his adjustment here. And I'm pulling up his innings over the last couple of starts. So he's gone 5 in his last 2. He only went 6 innings once. This is actually like the perfect line. This is like a true Vegas line for Senga. He's gone 5.1, 6, 4.2, and then 5 and 5. So, man, this one's really, really tricky for him. I think I'm going to go with the push as well. I think here's why, Joe. I think for the Mets right now, this early in his major league career, they are happy with him through 5. They don't want to even push it that much where they're like, we need the 6th inning from you. So if Senga's even decent, it feels like the number will be 5. All right, our last one. How many home runs will Mark Vientos hit at AAA Syracuse, which they will have 6 games throughout this stretch? Vientos right now, I know he's been tearing it up in Syracuse for the most part. I want to check his numbers on the year. He is officially up to 8 home runs. He's got an OPS that's almost at 1,200 in just 25 games. Man, I'm going to go with 2 home runs here for Vientos in the next 6, Joe. It's a big number, but he's capable of doing it.
I want to go 2 as well. I
go
feel
2.
like I'm going to go 2. I have to be smart here from a point standpoint. I think 2. I was even leaning 3. I think
you can do it.
Vientos right now looks like he has maybe mastered the AAA level. Like, I think he looks fantastic. I mean, he's still going to swing and miss. He's still going to strike out. That's always going to be a part of his game. But he is showing the power to all fields there. He's looking more and more comfortable, and it feels inevitable that we will see Mark Vientos in Queens at some point this year. But I'll go 2 for the next 6 games.
And we will have more on Vientos during our mailbag section. All right, moving along, and it'll be fun to track those, see how the week goes. Time for a now very much regular segment, Joe, that you really wanted to lead our show with, and I respect you for that, because honestly, that's where my excitement was. The kids are all right. We will not be using any music from The Who. We don't have the budget to license the music for this show, in case you were wondering, but we will still rock with that as the segment name. All right, Joe, now we have the floor for Brett Baty here. I mean, the bottom line is with Baty, he's playing more. He is so comfortable at the plate. Maybe quietly my favorite thing is his ability to have a 2-strike approach for a young hitter, where you're talking about a guy with power and he can hit in the gaps, but he can also hit with 2 strikes. Joe, let me frame it like this. Is Brett Baty exceeding your expectations already? Is he meeting them? Like, where are we at overall with Baty? Because even for how much we were excited about him, he was a 1st-round pick. He's had a good minor league career, a nice rise. Even this amount of production this quickly is a little eye-popping.
I wouldn't say I expected Brett Baty to come up and immediately have like a 900-something OPS and really
home run off a lefty?
Yeah, and not even just a home run off a lefty. Like I mentioned before, like that was 108 miles an hour off the bat. That was 430 feet. Like, he almost hit it to the Shea Bridge off a lefty. And that lefty, I believe, has only given up 3 home runs in his career to a left-handed hitter. So just couldn't be more impressed with what Brett has done so far. And it's just his skill set, because when this, covering the NFL draft that just ended, and covering prospects, we always talk about the skill set and what someone's capable of doing. It's just very gratifying to see it, talk about it, and then the person comes to the major leagues and they show exactly what they're capable of doing. Like you said, working counts is something Brett Baty has always been able to do. That was one of the main reasons the Mets drafted him in the 1st round. It was power, and it was advanced knowledge of the strike zone. And they're like, he makes good enough contact. We'll help him make more consistent contact and help with some pull side power, which now you're seeing the pull side power too. Off that lefty, he pulled the ball like that. And Even the last out of the first game of the doubleheader, he ripped that ball to right. So, look, I think Brett Baty has been everything we could have asked and more. And we'll get into this part as well on Alvarez. There was so much hype about these guys' defense and how much of a struggle Baty was at third and how much of a struggle Alvarez was behind the plate. They both look more than fine defensively at their positions. Baty, he's had a couple little moments, but he smoothly turned a double play during the doubleheader. He's showing off the strong arm. He looks comfortable. He looks calm out there. So I think how he's performing offensively has transitioned into the field with some comfort, because we've often talked about the other side of the coin, right? Where it's, if you're not hitting, you sometimes take that into the field and then it kind of just piles on itself. Baty's comfort at the plate has transitioned into the field, and he's looking like a guy that's batting eighth or so now in lineups. I don't know how long Buck's going to be able to hold him down there.
That's where I want to close the book on Baty before we move to Alvarez. And before I do throw that to you, I mean, the bottom line is the whole, like, we've seen the Mets really put training wheels on young players if they're, obviously in matchup situations where they won't play against lefties, they won't play against righties. Baty splits right now. I mean, he's got 11 games against righties, 7 against lefties. Joe, I mean, he's got a 964 OPS against lefties. He's got a 904 OPS against righties. I know it's a small sample, but this is what this guy has done. So when I frame it like that, how high can Baty make his way up in this order right now? Because I don't want to get over my skis, but there is a world by June, July, that Brett Baty is the third best hitter on this team. And I sincerely mean that.
Very good possibility that's the case. And, you look at guys like Starling Marte, like, he's going to be fine. He has a 630 OPS or whatever. We know that's not what Starling Marte is going to do. But if Brett continues to hit for the power that he does, how we talked just last week or 2 weeks ago that, the top 5 has to have Nimmo, Marte, Lindor, Alonso, and McNeil in some facet. That conversation could change over the next month and a half, whatever. If Baty continues at this torrid pace, you might not be able to keep him out of the top 5, and then that'll force a decision. Does McNeil move down the lineup, which you don't even really want to do? But look, if the Mets offense can get to the point where it's quote unquote so good that you can shift one of those type of players out of the top 5 in the lineup, that just shows where this team is maturing offensively. And I think it's one of the reasons why beginning of the season, when everyone was fretting about the lineup, and the stats still aren't there, they're like middle of the pack and a lot of stuff. So it's not like there's some dominant offense right now. But if Brett Baty and even Francisco Alvarez to a lesser degree can kind of fulfill their potential now, this lineup changes on its head from everything that we were talking about, the other players that were playing in those spots.
And I think at a minimum, if you don't want to move Baty up and he's going to hit like this, he is the solution to when McNeil and Vogelback in the middle of the lineup or the bottom middle of the lineup constantly get on base. And I mean, not to call out names, but Canna and Escobar don't do anything. Nito, Canna, and Escobar don't do anything to move runners around. Now that's Brett Baty. That is a colossal difference in the infrastructure of your offense. So
huge. And I was actually going to bring that up. Like, everyone complains on Twitter and online about Daniel Vogelback.
Insanity, by the way.
He's the DH. He needs to hit home runs, as if every DH is like Big Papi or something. But look, his skill set is like, do I want more power from Daniel Vogelback? Yes. Is it in there? Yes. But like, he's probably like an 18 to 23, 24 home run guy. But if he's going to get on base at a 430 clip with Brett Baty and Francisco Alvarez, and for all the grief we've given Mark Canna, he's got to be better. That, like, historically, he's been better than what he's doing now. So you have to assume there's at least some level of improvement to come from Mark Canna. Like, the whole premise was Vogelback gets on base and no one does anything with it. Now Vogelback's getting on base, and now the Mets have people that can do something with it.
Exactly. And I think the appreciation for Vogelback will grow when guys that are after him are actually moving, if it's not him around the base paths, because, they like to pinch run him.
I I love moving him around the base pass though.
It is very fun to watch. It is the missed throw to first base on the should be double play where his helmet hit the ejection button was just unbelievable. So, all right, so let's move to Francisco Alvarez here. Alvarez has seemed to have found it a little bit here, Joe. I mean, the bottom line is for a while it felt like he was a constant 0 for 4, 0 for 3, striking out at least every game. And you go back to really, I mean, the last couple games, he had 2 hits against the Braves in the Mets win, 2 big hits. He had that double, the 2 RBI double. He had a hit in the last game against the Nationals and scored a run. He had a hit against the Braves in that first game with only 2 at bats. Alvarez is starting to put together better plate appearances. We know he could drive the ball. I think there's a little hope here. And let's not forget, the bar for Alvarez at this position is so drastically low. I guess you could say the same about Baty replacing Escobar, but compared to Nito, if Alvarez is a guy, Joe, that's going to hit 230, 240, but a lot of those hits are doubles and home runs, and then Narvaez is back, and it's Alvarez and Narvaez, that is a way different world from what we're used to at the catching position for the Mets. I'm trying to keep that perspective in mind rather than Francisco Alvarez needs to hit 280 with 30 home runs as a 21-year-old.
No, they just we talked about it last week too, Connor. The stats of a catcher, like the offensive expectations at the catcher position throughout the sport, it's not that strong. It's why it's such an advantage to have somebody like Francisco Alvarez that has the potential to be an 800 plus OPS kind of guy. And if that's the case, that's a distinct advantage over, whoever you're facing with their 672 on base percent OPS catchers. And his defense stood out in a huge way. As of this recording here on Tuesday, he's in the 92nd percentile now in pitch framing in the sport. So he's looked great behind the plate. I'm going to be honest. Blocking balls, he's even getting better at that. It seems like him and the pitchers are on the same wavelength on things. I know PitchCom helps out a lot with that, but it seems like he's calling a game. He's receiving well. The pitchers seem to like throwing to him. One thing is throwing out base runners. That's something he has been very good at in the minors. But I heard a stat during one of the Mets games that by time the catcher throws the ball to a runner trying to steal second, they only have like 52 feet left to go. So that's based on like how much time it takes for the pitcher to get the ball to the catcher. And that's the worst in baseball. So he's throwing from a position of much less ground to cover than anywhere else. But behind the plate, couldn't be more satisfied. And I said this on the show previously that Francisco Alvarez has always hit. There's been adjustments at every single level when he first got there because he has routinely been years younger than the average age of the league that he's in. And now he's a 21-year-old catcher in the major leagues. You give him more opportunities. You let him play. You let him get some comfort, and good things can happen. If he's playing really part-time and almost as Nito's backup of sorts, that's when you're going to see the really bad at-bats. And because in his head, he probably thinks he needs to hit 3 home runs when he plays because he doesn't know the next time he's going to play. So if he could play more consistently, you're going to see the kind of stuff. And he's hitting the ball hard too. I mean, he had 2 balls north of 100 miles an hour yesterday. I think his single was 109. So this is another guy. Hits the heck out of the ball. Give him a chance. Let him play. And these are 2 stalwarts to look ahead to. And they're going to have their ups and downs throughout the rest of the season. You hope it's more up than down. But these are guys that you look at as core pieces of this Mets lineup for years to come.
And that alone is exciting. You're kind of in the phase of them. Hey, the experience is great. If they figure out some things, great. Right now, Brett Baty is blowing those expectations out of the water. Alvarez starting to turn the corner, and it's the beginning of May. Like, this is still early right now. So really exciting to watch what these guys can do as they can grow. And most importantly, they are helping the big league club. All right, Joe, let's rapid fire our rotation review. We'll start with Kodai Senga and Joey Lucchesi. Senga, in the loss against the Nationals, went 5 innings, only gave up 2 earned runs. He did walk 4. He struck out 7. He threw 94 pitches. And then you look at Lucchesi, he went 5 and a third of an inning, 3 earned runs, only walked 2, did give up the home run, and threw 90 pitches. So And the Mets won that game. That was the back and forth crazy game against the Nationals that they closed out 9-8. It seems like the issue we talked about, Joe, with Senga is just working deeper into games. And with Lucchesi, you take that every time from a guy that was projected to be your 9th starter coming into the season.
I'll touch on Lucchesi first. Very impressed with what I've seen from him. For him to go 90+ pitches his first 2 starts, I think is a huge sign. And going to be honest, Max and Verlander are obviously coming back in the Detroit series. And Buck said that Carlos Carrasco could potentially be back next week. So if Carrasco comes back, you're going to have a decision on that 5 spot. And I think Lucchesi.
It's not one for me right now.
No, but I'll tell you, Lucchesi could be making his case to be that fit starter.
I agree.
I mean, both him and McGill have minor league options, so you could send either one of them down because look, I know the bullpen, the middle relief has been a little bit questionable because, we're calling up the likes of Denny Reyes and Jeff Brigham's getting opportunities and all these guys. I still think they need to keep these guys stretched out as starters because of the uncertainty surrounding Max and Verlander and everyone. So I don't want to shift either of them to the bullpen now. But Joey Lucchesi here on Tuesday. So if you're listening on Tuesday, you'll see how he pitches. But if you're listening on Wednesday, you already know how he pitched. But if he can have one of those big starts on Tuesday again, maybe not quite San Francisco where he's just dominant for so deep into the game. But if he could give you 6 innings of 2 or 3 run ball and just throw 90 to 93 pitches again, I think there's a genuine case to be made for Tyler McGill to be the guy sent down instead of Lucchesi. And Senga, we touched on earlier a little bit. He's just got to get that pitch count down early, which means he needs to throw more.
Yeah.
It's the walks, it's the deep counts. So even when he's getting guys out, it's not like he's putting guys away quickly, like he's working 3-2 counts or getting a bunch of foul balls. So he's just got to get better command and control and get the ball put in play and trust the defense behind him because the Mets have a great defense. So get the ball in play, and he's still getting swings and misses, which is a good sign.
And then finally, we'll go to Tyler McGill because we know the look ahead with Scherzer and Verlander we've talked about a lot. We did the innings preview with them. We have big expectations for them long term. We'll see how deep into the games they could work this week, but just having that 1-2 punch is massive. But closing the door here with McGill, Joe, 5 2/3 innings, 3 earned runs against the Braves. The strikeouts for McGill this year are nothing crazy. He's kind of hovering around 4 strikeouts a game at this point. But to give him credit, he really hasn't had that start, Joe, that's a disaster. The worst one was against the Giants where he pitched 4 innings and gave up 4 earned runs. But other than that, for McGill, it's kind of been 5 innings, around 2 earned runs, where that's kind of what you want from a guy filling a gap. And you're right, it does make an interesting conversation with the options that he has.
Yeah, he's been fine. Like he maybe stayed in 1 batter too late on Monday's doubleheader, and obviously that cost them at the time. I know that Drew Smith was up and ready, so he could have went to him, but McGill was cruising up until that moment. So like you said, Connor, he's kind of your 5-inning guy. So maybe it's one of those things that after 5 innings, you have someone ready, and it's basically like the first sign of something going on. You get him out of there before obviously an opportunity happens like yesterday where he gave up the bases loaded double there. But I think Lucchesi right now, we're only a couple starts in, so these things could change. It almost feels like there's more upside with what you could get from Lucchesi. And I don't think his downside right now is all that different from what Tyler McGill kind of is, which is fine. 5, like a fit starter. If you told me I had a fit starter that was giving me 5 innings, 2-3 runs every time out, I'd sign up for that. I think that's perfectly fine, especially in today's game. So I think they have an interesting decision on their hands, whether it's Lucchesi or it's McGill. But I think I lean Lucchesi. But also, if you're listening to this show on Wednesday, he might have given up 6 runs against Detroit, and then I just kind of looked dumb. But that's kind of where I stand, I think, on those guys.
I'm with you. Listen, McGill is clearly a really nice guy to have on call as that number 6. And that number 6 this year has been a starter the entire season. The bottom line is, Joe, when we have these conversations and we talk about Senga and McGill and Lucchesi, wait and see. But definitely Senga and McGill being that, like, okay, sound the alarms for the 5th or 6th inning. that's taxing on a bullpen where Max and Verlander have to be the workhorse dogs in this rotation. I think they will be, but it just emphasizes how important it is for them as that 1-2 punch. All right, let's go down on the farm here. Let's check in on Alex Ramirez in Brooklyn. He extended his team season-long hitting streak to 12 games. The stretch is tied for the longest active streak in the South Atlantic League. Ramirez is 17 for his last 49. That is a 347 batting average. Not bad. During that time, he's had 6 runs scored, 2 doubles, a home run, 10 RBIs, 5 walks, and 4 stolen bases. Since the start of last season, Ramirez leads all Mets minor leaguers in batting average with 283 and is tied with teammate outfielder Stanley Consuegra for the lead in triples with 7. Joe, in your eyes, where are things with Alex Ramirez? This is somebody that, while very, very young and in the lower levels of the system, we've been excited about him for about 2 full years now.
Really excited with how Ramirez has started in Brooklyn. Like you said in that read there, 12-game hitting streak. The only thing is the power hasn't showed up yet, but I think he still needs to physically mature some more. I think there is some power in that bat. I don't think it's, Ronnie Mauricio or Mark Vientos type power, but there is some power in that bat. I know one thing that he worked on this spring was his swing plane to give him some opportunity on upstairs fastballs. And I think he's off to a great start. He's playing good outfield in center. The speed is showing off by the triples. He's stealing some bases. So he's kind of your 5-tool type of guy, although maybe none of them are like elite traits, but I think he's kind of above average across the board, and the power's going to come. And I've been impressed with his pitch recognition a bit. I mean, he's getting on base around the 350 clip. So I think all things are pointing up for Alex Ramirez, and I think there's a reasonable chance you see him in Double-A before this year is out. And yeah, he's surely one of the top prospects in the system, top 100 in the sport. And I had said this when Connor, when you and I go back to the Queens Baseball Convention, if he can continue to get stronger this season and maybe show a little more of that pop, we could be looking at a top 30 prospect in the sport, next offseason.
No doubt about that. He's one of those guys that he has a physical profile to be a pretty special player and somebody we will keep an eye on this show, as we always do. This week, the Brooklyn Cyclones take on the Aberdeen Ironbirds, an affiliate of the Baltimore Orioles, featuring the top pick in the 2022 MLB draft, infielder Jackson Holliday. I remember talking about him, Joe. On Friday, celebrate Cinco de Mayo with the Cyclones. They have a sugar skull cap giveaway for the first 1,000 fans and a special food and drink menu for a Friday fiesta. For tickets, log on to brooklyncyclones.com. Brooklyn Cyclones games, man, they are a lot of fun. There's always tons of giveaways, tons to eat, tons to drink. It's a good time. All right, a reminder, you're listening to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your shows. We're going to take a quick 15-second break, and we will be right back with our mailbag.
This spring, be transformed during the Cadillac Move Up sales event. This is your moment to step out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. Visit your Cadillac showroom today.
Welcome back. As we always do, time to close out the show answering your mailbag questions. And Joe, this was one of those weeks that you go through your mentions on Twitter at PSL The Flushing. You read tons of replies, as always, which we genuinely appreciate. But about 80 to 90% of them had one big question, and that simply was, we'll take Michael Sens here. How much longer can the Mets keep Mark Vientos in AAA before their hand is forced like Brett Baty? And when he's called up, who is the odd man out barring injury? Fam, Escobar seems to be a bit of a roster crunch.
It is a roster crunch, and to be honest, I don't think their hand will be forced like it was with Brett Baty, unfortunately. When you look at the way this Mets roster is set up, Mark Vientos is really a first base DH at this point. So if you're going to get rid of somebody, there's not someone you're going to option to the minor leagues unless you want to option Luis Guillorme, but he's kind of your backup shortstop and your best defensive backup player. So he does have a minor league option left, so if they want to go that route, they can. But I just struggle to see how he's going to crack the team without an injury or something happening. Look, because I know it's very quick for Mets fans to say DFA this guy, DFA that guy. But the Mets have no reason to cut Eduardo Escobar. The Mets have no reason right now to cut Tommy Pham. The reality is there's no outfield depth in this organization. Tim LeCastro's working his way back so he could fill, but LeCastro's more of a fifth outfielder and pinch runner than a fourth outfielder, which you expect to play on a semi-regular basis. So for me, I think it's unfortunately a numbers game, and I think Vientos is probably big league ready offensively, and I think unfortunately that means he's going to have to keep beating up on AAA pitching, because if you cut one of these veterans, there's no turning back. So if you do that and you call up Mark Vientos, and let's just say he struggles and you have to send him back down, you're now out that veteran and you're out Mark Vientos on the roster. So do I think he warrants a big league call-up? Absolutely. Do I think he's ready to hit the big league level? I do. Do I think there's a spot on the roster right now? I do not.
I'm with you. Vientos has been awesome. I hope he continues to be awesome, and it's a great option to have if somebody gets hurt. You said the perfect phrase of roster construction is probably what holds him back right now, because he's not going to be playing in the field for you. And then you have Vogelback from one side of the plate, Vientos from the other side of the plate, taking up roster spots with no defensive capability. So that's just the reality is right now. But we will keep an eye on Vientos and hope that he continues to mash, because that is still a good piece to have. This from longtime listener Steve Miller. He said, do you see the Mets being more or less the same in terms of aggressiveness on stolen bases the rest of the year? They're currently tied for sixth in baseball and a high rate of success at that. Joe, my takeaway here is, yes, I think it's a big part of their game, because they are a team that gets on base and they want to maximize their speed, whether it's Marte, hopefully more Lindor. Like you said, LeCastro was a giant factor in that number, and he's been out on the IL. But yeah, I think this is part of the Mets game right now. I think it's part of everybody's game in baseball. But for the Mets, I think they have a high rate right now, not just success rate, but actually attempts rate, because the Mets get on base a lot.
Yeah, they're getting on base, and LeCastro actually played a rehab game with St. Lucie on Sunday, so he appears to be on the mend. So I don't know when he's going to be activated.
Yeah, who comes off the roster for him though right now?
That's a good question. Probably a reliever.
Take a bullpen arm? Yeah, bullpen.
Yeah, I would think a reliever, because they went heavy on arms. But LeCastro will be back soon, and he's going to be ready to run for Vogelback. It's like a slow pitch softball. He just has the guy that's just waiting at first base for when he gets on base. But I think exactly what they're doing is fine. I don't think they need to be any more or less aggressive. I think they're picking the right times to run. And to your point, Connor, the success rate has been there. So I think what they're doing now, just keep doing that. They don't need to be number one in the league in steals, but this is a team that in spring training, we were saying, how are they going to get stolen bases? It's not a big stolen base team. Brandon Nimmo's been more aggressive than he had previously. Obviously, Starling Marte seems like the new rules are benefiting him, and he's healthy from his surgeries. Lindor's pitching in some, and then LeCastro's obviously the big factor off the bench that he gets on first. He's running, and you're not throwing him out anyway. So I think what they're doing is perfect. Just keep doing that, and hover around top 5 to 10 in baseball in stolen bases, and I think that's a win for you.
Marte's got 9 steals in 26 games. He had 18 all of last year. Marte, barring health, is well on his way to a 30 stolen base season right now. And that is a massive, massive swing. All right, our last one here from Nathan Hirsch. Nathan asked, why have the Mets been playing Jet Williams in the outfield? Wouldn't best practice be to let him develop at shortstop and then worry about other positions as he gets closer to the majors? What do you think of this development idea for Jet here, Joe?
It's funny. They kind of wouldn't do this with Ronnie Mauricio until he was destroying AAA
so you had
pitching.
To.
Yeah, so it's a little interesting. But let me tell you, when the Mets drafted Jet Williams, I talked to people with the Mets and then outside the Mets about him, and there was a bit of a split as to where he was going to play defensively long term. Some said he could be fine at shortstop. He's kind of like Anthony Volpe, right? Volpe with the Yankees. Smaller, not like the biggest arm. So he could play short potentially. Obviously, with the Mets long term, that's not a thing. But his plus athleticism fits so well in center field. Second base is obviously a great fit for a guy of his lateral quickness and his stature as well. We talk about Mauricio maybe being the biggest second baseman in history, and Jet Williams kind of fits in with a lot of the smaller second basemen that are throughout baseball. So I think it's I think it's interesting that he's playing center field already. And I think that what that tells me and I haven't talked to anyone about this in player development. I'm probably going to make some calls now that the question came into the show here. They must feel really good about how he is offensively right now, where they're like, if we play him somewhere new that he hasn't really played much of, we don't think it's going to have a negative impact on him at the plate. So I think that's probably a credit to where Jet Williams is at from a development standpoint at the plate. And yeah, his long-term future is not at shortstop, could be center, could be second, but just a really fun player that's getting on base at a great clip down in St. Lucie and just showing off that athleticism and, above average plate discipline. And the bat the ball skills were there when he was drafted, so they're going to come. The batting average, if you look, isn't great on the surface, but I'm really excited about Jet. He just entered MLB Pipeline's top 100 prospects, and he's going to be a stalwart in top 100 prospect lists until hopefully he makes his way up to Queens here in a few years.
Yeah, I know how excited he was. One of your guys in the draft.
Yeah.
When they took him, it was really fun for us considering how much we had talked about him. And I mean, just the athleticism, you would think, projects so well around the field, and the Mets need outfielders too. If this kind of puts him on a quicker path to the majors, and I'm not saying he's anywhere close to being a major leaguer, but if this puts him on a quicker path, a more ideal path to the major leagues, and it's not affecting him at the plate, then great. Who cares? This is something, Joe, that we've wanted with their more athletic prospects for a long time, especially after they traded P. Crow Armstrong. It's a way to get better in the outfield. So, and with that wraps up our show. A busy show today, Joe. There's just so much going on with the team. It's a big stretch coming up for them. The young guys have given them a little bit of infusion that was much needed. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I felt like this since the start of this season, the Mets have just been missing something, and I can't put my finger on what it is. It could also be the fact that they're without their biggest free agent signing in Justin Verlander. And, Pete Lindor very, very early out of the gate struggled and then fully got it rolling again. But it just feels like that youth movement always gives teams a different kind of bark and bite. And it's going to be big for the Mets down the stretch here. So closing thoughts on today's show.
Definitely felt like they were missing that youth thing. And we always circle back to the Braves last year, right? Like Michael Harris and Spencer Strider just feel like they injected something into the team.
And then Vaughn Grissom late in the season.
And Vaughn Grissom. Yeah, there's something to it. I don't know if it's quantifiable. You can't really put your finger on it, but there's just something to young, exciting prospects who are just excited to be there and performing at a high level. And right now, Brett Baty's doing that, and Francisco Alvarez is trending in that direction. And I can't wait to see Justin Verlander debut as a Met, because it was one of those things. Go back to spring training, Connor. We saw Justin Verlander walk into the facility in a Mets uniform. Little did we know it would take until May to actually see him pitch in a real game. But I'm really excited to see Verlander, because I think it's, to a degree, gone under the radar, like what kind of impact he can make. Like it almost feels too obvious, right? Where it's just like, yeah, duh, Justin Verlander, Cy Young Award winner. But I feel like we just haven't talked about him because he's been out of sight, out of mind. And now he's here, and I can't wait to see him pitch for the Mets.
Absolutely. I think it has been underrated. Like the Mets having to play a bullpen game against their division rival. And now you could swap out a scenario like that with Justin Verlander, or what we've seen from a lot of the guys that have filled the void in the rotation. It's huge. This is the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. This spring, be transformed during the Cadillac Move Up sales event. This is your moment to step out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. And remember to subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SNY's YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much, everybody. Catch you next week.